This one purchase delays wealth by 10 years. So let me paint you a picture. It's a Saturday morning, you've just gotten paid, and for the first time in maybe a few months, your bank account actually looks kinda decent. Not great, but decent. And you're sitting there with your coffee, scrolling through your phone, and you see it. Maybe it's a car. Maybe it's a new apartment in a nicer part of town. Maybe it's a watch or a handbag or the latest iPhone. Or honestly, and this is where it gets really specific, maybe it's just a slightly too expensive couch that you've been eyeing for 3 weeks. And in that moment, something shifts in your brain. You start doing the math, but not real math, like fantasy math, the kind where you convince yourself that because you can technically afford the monthly payment, you should buy the thing. You think about how good it'll feel. You think about how you've been working so hard lately, and you deserve this. And before long, you've already decided. The justification comes after, the decision comes first. Here's the thing. My name is Adam, and I spend probably an unhealthy amount of time thinking about money. Not just the numbers side of it, but the psychology. Why people make the financial decisions they do. Why some people seem to quietly, almost effortlessly accumulate wealth over time, while others are stuck in this exhausting cycle of earning and spending and wondering where it all went. I find that stuff genuinely fascinating. Maybe a little obsessive, but fascinating. And what I've noticed after all that thinking, all that reading, all those conversations, is that there's usually not some massive dramatic financial mistake that derails people's wealth-building journey. It's not one catastrophic event. It's almost always one type of purchase, a specific category of spending decision that, on the surface, feels totally normal, maybe even smart. But underneath it is quietly, slowly delaying financial freedom by a decade or more. And by the end of this, I think you're going to look at certain things in your life, things you own right now, things you're maybe planning to buy, completely differently. Not with guilt, not with shame, but with clarity. And that clarity, that's honestly where everything starts to change. The purchase nobody warns you about. Okay, so let's get into it. When most people hear the phrase, "this one purchase delays your wealth," they immediately think, drugs, gambling, some obvious financial sin. But no, it's nothing dramatic. It's nothing most people would even flag as a problem. The purchase, the category of purchase I'm talking about, is the status upgrade. The thing you buy not because you genuinely need it at that level, but because of what owning it communicates to other people. To yourself. The car that's 3 tiers above what gets you from A to B. The apartment in the trendy neighborhood when the slightly quieter one would be just as comfortable. The designer item you bought with a credit card because your colleague had one and something just stirred in you. Now, before you say, "Adam, I'm not materialistic, this doesn't apply to me," hang on. Because the sneaky thing about status purchases is that most people who make them don't think of them as status purchases. They dress it up in different language. It's an investment. It's better quality. It'll last longer. I work hard. I deserve nice things. And listen, some of that is genuinely true sometimes, but a lot of the time, it's a story we tell ourselves. And the story costs us a lot. Let me give you an example. Take a guy named Lewis. Lewis is 27, earns decent money, just got a promotion. He's been driving a perfectly reliable used Toyota for 3 years. It's paid off. It runs fine. But Lewis just hit this new income level and something in him feels like the car doesn't match the life he's building. So he buys a new BMW. Not the most expensive one, but a BMW. The monthly payment is £480. Insurance goes up, maintenance costs more because German engineering, as they say. Now, here's where it gets interesting, because this is the part people skip over. That £480 a month, if Lewis had instead invested it in a decent index fund from age 27 to age 37, 10 years, and never touched it, at a conservative average return of 8% per year, he'd have around £87,000 sitting there. Just from that one decision, just from keeping the Toyota. He didn't lose £87,000. He just never made it. And that's the invisible tax of status purchases. The money doesn't disappear dramatically, it just quietly never becomes what it could have been. Why our brains are wired for this trap. Here's the part where I have to give our brains some credit, because honestly, they're not being they're just operating on ancient software running in a very modern world. Human beings are fundamentally social creatures. For most of our evolutionary history, status within a group wasn't just about ego, it was about survival. Higher status meant better access to resources, better protection, better mates, better outcomes. So our brains developed these incredibly powerful drives to seek status and to be aware of where we sit relative to the people around us. The problem is that this system was designed for a tribe of like 150 people, people you actually knew, people whose situations you could actually assess. It was not designed for Instagram. It was not designed for a world where you're simultaneously being compared to your neighbor, your colleagues, your university friends who seem to be doing really well based on their posts, and also somehow a random influencer in Dubai. Robert Cialdini wrote about social proof. Thornstein Veblen wrote about conspicuous consumption back in 1899. This is not a new observation. But what is new is the scale and the speed at which we're being exposed to status signals every single day. And every exposure, consciously or not, recalibrates your sense of what normal looks like, what you should have, what level of life you're entitled to at your age and income. And so you buy things, not out of greed necessarily, out of a deeply human, deeply understandable need to belong, to feel like you're doing okay, to feel like you're progressing. The purchase is basically emotional regulation disguised as a transaction. Which is why I always say you can't shame people out of this pattern. You can only help them see it clearly enough that they choose differently. The 10-year math nobody does. Let me slow down here because I think the numbers deserve more than just a quick mention. Because when you actually sit with the math of this, it's kind of staggering. Let's say you're 30 years old and you make 3 significant status upgrade decisions over the next few years. Nothing crazy. We're not talking about buying a yacht. We're talking about 1, trading in a working car for a newer, nicer one with a $400 a month payment. 2, renting an apartment that's $350 a month more than you need to spend because of the postcode and the aesthetic. And 3, gradually upgrading your wardrobe, your tech, your lifestyle to match a peer group that earns a bit more than you, maybe $200 a month in aggregate. That's $950 a month, nearly 11,400 pounds a year. Not going to savings, not going to investments, going to maintain a lifestyle that feels appropriate for the version of yourself you're performing. If you invested that $950 a month from age 30 to age 40 at 8% annual returns, you'd have approximately 174,000 pounds, nearly 175,000 pounds. At 50, still not touching it, you're looking at around 400,000 pounds from that 1 decade of disciplined redirection. And here's what gets me. Most people reading that feel a bit numb to it because 174,000 pounds at 40 sounds abstract. It doesn't feel real in the way that a new car feels real. The car is tangible. You can touch it. You can smell it. You can drive it to work and feel something. The investment account just sits there, growing quietly, invisibly. And human psychology is terrible at valuing invisible future gains against very visible present pleasures. This isn't a character flaw. It's a cognitive bias called hyperbolic discounting. We systematically undervalue future rewards relative to immediate ones. It's baked into how we think. But the truly wealthy, and I don't mean just rich, I mean people who have genuine financial freedom, most of them figured out how to override that instinct in this specific area. Not across their whole lives, not through deprivation or joylessness, just in this one category of decision-making. The status treadmill, and why you can never win. Now here's the part that honestly, when I first really got it, it kind of changed how I saw everything. There's this concept, sometimes called the hedonic treadmill, and it basically describes the human tendency to return to a relatively stable level of happiness after major positive events. You get the raise, you're happy, then you adjust. Now that's just normal. You need more to feel the same lift. Status purchases work exactly the same way, except they have a social dimension that makes them even more insidious. Because it's not just about how you feel, it's about how you compare. When Lewis bought the BMW, he felt great. For a while. Then his colleague got a Range Rover. Then another friend moved into a really nice penthouse apartment. And suddenly Lewis's BMW felt Ordinary. Not bad, just ordinary. And the itch started again. This is the treadmill. You can never get off it by spending more because spending more just upgrades the baseline. The comparison group shifts with you. The people you're trying to keep pace with, consciously or not, they're also spending, they're also performing, and the finish line keeps moving. The only way to genuinely win this game is to stop playing it. Or more precisely, to decide for yourself what enough looks like, independent of what the people around you have. That sounds simple. It is not simple. It requires a level of psychological self-awareness that, honestly, most people never develop because nobody sits them down and explains that this is what's happening. The wealthy people I've studied, and I'm talking about people who built wealth from ordinary incomes, not inheritance, not lottery wins, almost all of them have this in common. At some point, they made a quiet internal decision to decouple their identity from their consumption, to stop using purchases as a way to signal success and start using their actual financial position as the measure. The identity trap, spending to be someone. Let me go a little deeper on this because I think it's the most overlooked piece. Most of the conversation around overspending focuses on habits and budgets and tracking your expenses, and those things matter. But they miss the root. The root is identity. When you buy something beyond your means, when you upgrade to a status you haven't financially earned yet, a lot of the time you're not buying a thing, you're buying a version of yourself. You're trying to become someone by acquiring the props of that person. And I get it. I genuinely get it, because there's something almost logical about it. If successful people have nice cars, then having a nice car makes me feel more like a successful person, right? If people who've made it live in nice apartments, then you see where this goes. But here's the cruel irony. The actual financially free people, the ones with real wealth, real options, real security, most of them, at the stage where they built that wealth, did not look the part. Warren Buffett famously still lives in the house he bought in 1958 for $31,500. He drives a modest car. He eats at McDonald's. Now you can argue Buffett is an extreme case. Fair enough. But the pattern shows up again and again at every level. The spending to become someone approach is always backwards. You build the financial reality first, and then, if you want, you adjust the lifestyle later. The people who tried to live the wealthy life before they have wealthy finances are essentially borrowing an identity on credit, and the interest is brutal. What the wealthy actually buy instead. Okay, I don't want this to just be a don't buy nice things video, because that's not really the message. And honestly, that would be kind of dull. The message is more nuanced than that. Because wealthy people, people who actually build and keep wealth, do spend money. Sometimes a lot of it, but they're remarkably consistent about what they spend it on, and it's worth paying attention to. They buy time. Whether it's hiring someone to clean, hiring someone to manage logistics, buying a home closer to work to avoid a brutal commute, they're willing to spend real money to get more hours back, because they've internalized the idea that time is the one resource you genuinely cannot make more of. They buy experiences that compound. Not every experience, but learning, courses, mentors, travel that exposes them to new ideas and new ways of thinking. This isn't just personal development speak. There's real evidence that novel experiences drive creativity and problem solving in ways that material possessions don't. They buy quality in specific categories while deliberately under-consuming in others. A truly wealthy person might have one extraordinary piece, one really beautiful watch, one piece of art they genuinely love, and then otherwise very understated life. Deliberate, considered quality in a few areas, not broad, unfocused upgrading across everything. And perhaps most importantly, they buy assets, ownership stakes, index funds, property, small business investments. They're constantly converting income into things that produce more income. The purchases they're most excited about aren't the ones that sit in their driveway. They're the ones that show up as gains on a quarterly statement. The shift from consumer to investor mindset is probably the single biggest identity transformation in the wealth building journey. And it doesn't happen by accident. It happens when someone, maybe in a video like this, maybe in a book, maybe in a conversation that just lands at the right moment, finally sees the pattern clearly enough to change it. So let's be practical for a minute, because I can tell you all of this and you can nod along and feel like you understand it, and then you'll see something you want on a Saturday morning and the feeling will rise up and the justifications will start and all of this will evaporate. That's human. That's real. So here are the things that actually help, not as a rigid system, but as anchors. The first is what I'd call the 10-year question. Before any significant purchase, I'd say anything over 300 or 400 pounds, ask yourself where this puts you in 10 years. Not just what it costs, but what it costs in opportunity. What could this money become if I redirected it? You don't have to always choose the investment. Sometimes you'll decide the thing is worth it. But at least make the trade consciously. At least see what you're giving up. The second thing is to genuinely interrogate your motivation. Not in a harsh, self-critical way, just curious. Why do I want this? Is it because it would genuinely improve my daily life in a meaningful way? Or is it because of how I'd feel being seen with it? Because of some version of myself I'm trying to step into? There's no wrong answer, but knowing the real answer keeps you honest. The third, and this one sounds almost too simple, is to automate the investment before you see the money. If the money goes straight into an investment account before it hits your current account, the mental accounting changes completely. You're not choosing not to spend every month. The decision was already made. You're just spending what's left, and you adjust. People adjust. It's remarkable how quickly you stop missing money you never see. And fourth, and maybe most importantly, start actively redefining what success looks like to you. Not to your peers, not to your family's expectations, not to the lifestyle content you consume, to you. Because if your definition of success is built entirely on external signals, the car, the apartment, the clothes, then you will spend forever chasing it. But if you build an internal scorecard, net worth, financial runway, how many months you could survive without income, then suddenly you have a game you can actually win, a finish line that doesn't keep moving. There's one last thing I want to say before we wrap up, and it's maybe the most human part of all this. When you stop using purchases to perform success, something interesting happens. You start to feel less anxious about money. Not immediately and not perfectly, but gradually. Because the performance is exhausting. Maintaining a lifestyle that's slightly beyond your means, keeping up with a peer group that's moving fast, always having the right thing, the right look, the right address, it takes energy, real energy, mental and financial. And the people I know, genuinely, who have stepped off that treadmill, describe a specific kind of quiet confidence that I think is hard to fully articulate. It's not the confidence of having the nicest things. It's the confidence of knowing your actual financial position is solid, knowing you have runway, knowing that if something went wrong tomorrow, you'd be okay for a year, maybe two, that you have options. That feeling, I honestly believe, is worth more than any car or apartment or watch. Not because material things are bad, but because the security of real financial health is a quality of life upgrade that affects everything. Your relationships, your decision-making at work, your willingness to take risks that could actually change your life, your stress levels, your sleep. Lewis, by the way, in my example, eventually figured this out. Not from one conversation, not from one video, but from a slow accumulation of clarity. He sold the BMW at a loss, paid off the difference, went back to a solid used car, and redirected the monthly savings. He told me later that the first few months felt weird, almost embarrassing, like he'd somehow downgraded his life. But after about 6 months, that feeling faded, and what replaced it was this calm, this sense that his money was finally working in the right direction. Final thoughts. So here's where we land. The purchase that delays wealth by 10 years isn't dramatic. It's not reckless. It's the quiet, socially sanctioned habit of spending money to signal a version of yourself that your bank account hasn't caught up with yet. It's the BMW on a Toyota budget, the premium apartment in the trendy postcode, the upgraded lifestyle calibrated to your aspirational peer group rather than your actual financial reality. And the reason it costs you a decade isn't just the price tag, it's the compound effect of money not invested, of wealth not accumulated, of financial options you don't have at 40 that you could have had if the decisions at 30 had been made just a little differently. The good news, and I want to end on this, is that none of this is permanent. The treadmill can be stepped off. The pattern can be interrupted. The math, as brutal as it looks when you run it, works just as powerfully in your favor once you redirect it. Compound interest doesn't care whether you've been using it or ignoring it for the past decade. It just cares what you do from here. My name's Adam, and I've been thinking about this stuff for a long time. And if there's one thing I genuinely believe, it's that the gap between people who build wealth and people who don't is almost never income. It's almost always this: what they choose to do with what they have, how they see money, what they use it to say about themselves. Change that, and honestly, you change everything. Thanks for watching.